Alright, we've been talking about some of the selection tools in Photoshop, and there are several more that I want to discuss as we move forward. However, before we get too much further along, I want to take just a moment and dedicate a video just to talking about some common hotkeys that I use when I'm making selections in Photoshop. Because selections should really be something that you don't even think about. If you need to grab some pixels, you need to be right there, ready to grab them without even thinking of it as an operation. It should come like second nature. And I think hotkeys are a great way to speed up your workflow. So some of the ones that I want to discuss, we've already mentioned in some capacity throughout some of these other videos, but I'll call special attention to them now. We have the M key, M as in Mike, and that will open up our marquee tool. If you hit Shift M, that'll cycle through elliptical and rectangular marquee. Please note that it will not cycle to your single row and single column tools, though hopefully that'll be just fine with you, because really the row and column selections are very specialized, and I don't think I've ever really needed them except for extremely rare edge cases. Next we have the L key, L as in lasso. So I mean, it's pretty easy to remember. We have M for marquee, L for lasso. Of course, you can hit Shift L and that'll cycle through your available lassos. So you have regular lasso, polygonal lasso, and magnetic lasso. We have W, and W is going to take you to Quick Select or the Magic Wand tool. That's why it's W, because back in the day, or several, I shouldn't say back in the day, several versions back in Photoshop, all you had was the Magic Wand tool. And of course nowadays we have Quick Select as well, and if you hit Shift W, cycle between those two, which is of course very handy. Now some other hotkeys that, some of which we've already kind of talked about in some capacity again. If we drag out a selection that we don't want anymore, we can hit Control D and that will deselect. So Control D is deselect. Control Shift D on the other hand is reselect. So it's kind of like undo and redo for the process of selection. Control D will nullify that selection. Control Shift D will bring back your last selection, which can be extremely handy if you need to take a selection and turn it on and off in between operations. So definitely keep those in mind. Control A is going to select your entire document. That's actually handier than you'd think it would be for certain operations that require a mask that covers your entire document. For example, if you drop down just a regular solid color layer, and if you try to move this right now, I am moving this. The pixels are in fact moving. You just can't really tell because the mask for this guy just kind of goes on forever and a day. Now if I throw him away and I hit Control A first, so I've selected my entire document, and then I drop down my solid color, now watch what happens when I move. You'll see that we are constrained to what the size of the document was. So there's a difference right there in your results just from selecting your entire document. So remember Control A. So the other one I want to show is Control Shift I, and what that does is that inverts a selection. So where we had just this one square selected, we now have the entire document except for that square selected. So as an example, if I just make a marquee selection, so just go boom, like so, and I drop down a solid color layer, you see we just get this red square right in the middle of our canvas. However, if I hit Control Shift I first, and then I drop down a solid color layer, we get everything but. So you see, inverting your selection. Very, very handy when playing with masks. I will mention that. Now, a couple of other things that are kind of pseudo hotkey-ish maybe, but not really. I just want to mention this. If you have a mask, so I'm going to make a random selection here, and I'll turn that into a solid color layer. Remember that you can hold down Control and click on a mask to select that. Now, that's only partially like a hotkey. I'm just going to say it's kind of bound to Control left mouse, but only if you're on a mask. So I realize it's not quite like a hotkey, but it's highly important to remember that you can do that, especially when you combine it with the fact that you can invert your selection. So if you hit Control and click on your mask and then hit Control Shift I, you get everything else. So now we could do another solid color layer like so, and it looks like my entire document is covered in red. And, well, I guess that's because it is, but I can grab my other color and you can see I now have both sections independently controlled, which if you think about that, the implications run really far, and that's extremely handy. So just as a recap, we've got M for marquee, we've got L for lasso, we've got W, which is quick select and our magic wand tool. We've got Control A to select all. We have Control D to deselect. We have Control Shift D to reselect. We have Control Shift I to invert. And of course, inverting when you have everything selected will give you nothing, which that's just, kind of funny. We have, of course, the ability to take a mask. And I got to make something with a mask real quick. And we can Control click on that mask to select it. It's very handy. There's one more hotkey that I want to mention. Just because I've actually received phone calls about this hotkey at like 4 in the morning from somebody who was panicking. So please don't ever do this. That's the Q key. Q is going to open up a special selection mode called Quick Mask Mode. And Quick Mask, which we haven't talked about yet in a nutshell, of course, when I say we haven't talked about it, that's assuming you're watching these videos in some sort of sequential fashion. Up to this point, I haven't talked about it, but anyway. So Quick Mask is just a way for you to paint down a selection and then hit Q again, and there you go. You painted out what you didn't want to have selected, everything else gets selected. The reason I've received phone calls about this is that somebody that, and I won't mention names because they know who they are, they tapped the Q key at one point and they had no idea what they'd done, and it seemed like all they could do is just paint this pale red, and they were getting really, really irritated and confused. And so they called me and said, did I break Photoshop? I don't know what's going on. And I was, kind of bleary, so I was like, did you hit the Q key? And I didn't quite get hung up on. But anyway, so be aware of the Q key. It will make more sense once you have seen Quick Mask Mode, and of course feel free to just play with that. But that is a rundown of some of my favorite hotkeys in terms of selection that will wrap this video up. Thank you very much for watching.